Good morning, Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's 5 a.m. on a Monday morning, and I'm going to strip this last heavy-duty Pontiac transmission. You watched me strip the first one. It had been full of water. It's pretty rough. I'm trying to clean up some of the parts to save them. The second one, I showed you a couple highlights in a different video. It was worse. It was completely full of water. So much so that the valve body rusted out. That's pretty bad. And now the third one, I put it up on the stand here yesterday. I sprayed some penetrating oil to hopefully free up some of the bolts. They all had the torque converters in them, but this is the only one I can turn the input shaft. I have to use a pair of pliers, but at least it turns. And it had a yoke in it that I had to drive out with a hammer, but it didn't come out that hard. And it had a dipstick tube and somewhat of a dipstick. And when I flipped it up into the drain bucket, only a little bit of water came out. So I'm hoping maybe this one is usable. So there's only one way to find out. Let's take it apart. This is the transmission pan off the second one. It's gross. There's no other way around it. So I broke 8 out of 13 pan bolts, despite my best efforts. Inside is not as gross as the other two. I was initially somewhat excited until you shine your light up near the pump and stuff, and it looks pretty nasty in there, so. Wah, wah, wah. We'll just keep ripping. Hope for the best. 2 out of 3 of these Sea Monster transmissions have had the 2-wire plug, and no, they're not the switch pitch torque converter models. Those are 65, 6, and 7. These are all later than that. 1 wire, the vertical one, still goes to your kick-down solenoid. This is the old style solenoid that takes the gasket. The other wire, the gray wire, goes to a switch in the valve body. This was for your transmission controlled spark system. Yeehaw. Total junk. Out of the 3 transmissions, this is the first time I've found oil. Hard to believe. But when you look up into the transmission, it looks worse than the other 2. But the valve body is probably still functional. The elements are strange, how they seep in, and sometimes they ruin stuff, sometimes they save it. So, me being thrifty, I guess is the word, the wire clip that was on the gray wire that went to the transmission controlled spark switch, that'll actually come in handy for the internal solenoid valve bodies where there's a wire that has to run back over here and I end up wire tying it to something. I'll use the clip. So if I save nothing else, I got myself a wire clip. My best guess is this probably laid on its side, and maybe the water built up here and ran into the top line of the transmission. I can't move that with a pry bar, the shift linkage. And I've been hammering on the modulator and I can't get it out of the case yet, so I'll let that soak. And out of the 3 transmissions, the ones that had a gallon of water in them or more, the valve body gasket's peeled right off. This one here is stuck. And the other servo was full of water. Both of them came right out by hand. This one had oil and I had to pry it out. So, but when I get it out, it's cleaner than a lot of running transmissions. And out of the 3, it's the only one that had the metal filter tube, even though it's for a shallow pan. Interesting. So I'm going to let that soak a little more and continue to hammer on it. Despite the fact I let it soak overnight and tried to be gentle, just broke the case, removing the modulator. And I popped out the pump, and that's pretty gross. Haven't taken it apart yet. You can see what you see when you pull out the pump. It's not pretty. But I'll still take it apart. I'm starting to add up the hours I have into these 3 rusty transmissions. Not good. Looking pretty squelchy, and it smells about the same. It's a shame I broke the case. Or the case broke, I should say. It's so white and powdery, I think it was probably weak. Clearly, because it didn't take much of a thump to break it. Either way, it's junk. I did get the drum stripped out, and these are all rusted in non-critical areas. I was actually able to pull the pistons out and stuff. It did have a set of smoked forward clutches. Maybe it had an issue back then. So I'm going to clear this stuff off the bench, and I'm pretty sure the center support in this case avoided getting rusty. All three of these transmissions have a Teflon on the bottom, a yellow one, and then 3 metal rings on the center support. That's interesting. So I'm hoping this doesn't get into the gears, but we're going to find out in just a second. And in all three cases, there was a check ball piston and a non-check ball drum for the direct, and just the opposite for the forward. So the forward piston is the one that I covet, if you will, because there's no check ball, and when you're using the 4L80E drum, the drum has the check ball. So I use a lot more of the non-check ball. So if you're shopping for used pistons, and that's your intent, go for the non-check ball. I have a whole pile of the check ball. And over here on the edge of the bench with all the other castaways is the roller style Sprague drum that was in the second transmission, and I've yet to get the piston out of it. I keep soaking it, trying to whack it to get it to spin, and then I'll grab it with a big pair of pliers and twist it out of there eventually. Well, I got lucky on the lower gear unit anyway. All the rust is external. None of the gears have been touched. Everything's in nice shape. This is the old style with the master spline. You can only assemble it one way, so the oil hole has to line up. In later years, I cut a groove all the way around so you could stick the sun shaft in any direction, but feeling kind of lucky on this one. Just got to get rid of the ugly rust on the outside. Over here near the parts washer, my process so far is this stuff is run for about 4 hours, and now it's ready to soak in the rust removal stuff that I bought. These parts here wait to be cleaned. I bought this 5-gallon bucket of Evaporust, but they put the shipping label right over the manufacturer's logo. Oh well. I'm going to try it. It's supposed to be environmentally friendly. You leave the stuff in for 12 hours or so. I'm going to try it. Well, it's a bummer about the case, but this transmission case will not show up in a future video where I saved it from the scrap bin. The aluminum around it is all white and powdery. There'd be no welding it. It's gone. It's toast. It's just the way it is. Years of being stored improperly took its toll. Looks like I'll be able to save some of the inside stuff. The story on these transmissions, I'm not sure I told it. I rebuilt the transmission for a guy, just an average transmission, and then he decided his buddy bought a better one from me and he wanted his updated like that one. And he said he had a bunch of cores. So I thought he already had them and it was a good deal for him. He could just give me what I'm looking for, because if I have to go out and chase these, you get time invested and they're still, you know, $100 to $300 a piece. As long as they're not full of water, they're well worth that. So he showed up with 3 of them, and I took them apart to see, you know, what I got, and they're not worth much. But I'll pay him something, because he actually tried to help me. I mean, you can't just be upset because it's full of water and then it's not what I expected, because the guy was honestly trying to help. And come to find out, he went out and paid for these. He didn't have them laying around, and I thought his uncle gave them to him. I was half listening to the story. Apparently, somewhere in it, I missed the fact that he paid good money for these, and that's too bad. And he has more. So he's going to bring me more. And I'm just hoping that those aren't as watery as these are, but they all came from the same place. So we'll be able to see how this story unfolds in the future, but I'll treat the guy decent because he tried to help me. So that's all you can do. Like, share, subscribe. I'll catch you next time.